to see you, Kawika.
Yeah, aloha mai kako. So thank you for the opportunity to share. And I was really struggling with how much knowledge am I going to fit into 5 minutes when we're talking about ancestral systems. So wait just a minute. Okay, coming through okay?
Aye.
Okay, mahalo. So figured out I want to really talk about, well, since we're riding the Molokai train with Kupuna Glen over there, man, I remember when Cowboy Osuka was our kupuna on Molokai. But anyway, I had the good fortune of bumping into an kupuna Earl Kava'a, who is from Molokai, living on Oahu now, and we started talking story about ahupua'a, and he said, "What is ahupua'a to you?" I'm like, "Uh-oh, this is a test. How am I going to pass this test?" So I gave him some whatever answer. I tried my best, and he said, "No, ahupua'a are systems within systems." I'm like, "Oh, wow, that's an amazing way to think about it." And I think that's where the productivity came from. These are systems embedded within other systems, in ways that are aligned towards productivity in Aina. And so I'm going to be talking about indigenous lo'i and local systems, or wetland agroecology specifically, integrated with aquaculture systems, but recognizing that these are not standalone systems. So a lot of what we have been talking about, the folks on the earlier presenters, is really about restoring indigenous food systems so Hawaii can feed Hawaii. As Natalie said, we were feeding the population that we have now 200 years ago, so we can do it again if we just restore these systems. But so to talk about the systems that agroecology and aquaculture are embedded within, we've heard the word ahupua'a before, and I think most people on this call are familiar with that concept. But ahupua'a, just as the lo'is and the locos are not standalone, ahupua'a are not standalone. They're dependent upon the ahupua'a around them and are embedded in a system of moku, and those moku are not standalone. They are embedded within a moku puni. And so it's really understanding the contextual alignment of these systems that's really important. So when we talk about conservation of biodiversity, we're really looking at the moku scale, but food production, for the most part, we're really looking at the ahupua'a scale, and foundational to how to do this well is the management of water, nutrients, and sediment. Ahupua'a are regenerative by design. So, these systems were famously able to create a superabundance of food without shipping in petrochemical fertilizers from across the ocean or even from across the island. The nutrients and water and sediment were managed in these systems to create food because that's all that they had. And so, as Noah mentioned, I'm now working in He'eia, and pictured on the right is an aerial photograph of He'eia from 1928, where a lot of the alluvial plain and wetland there used to be taro, but at this point was probably a lot of rice. But nonetheless, you get a idea how this system works. So you have the orographic rainfall pattern bringing in rains, and as those rains are shed from the clouds and traveling through the mountains, are bringing with them water and nutrients, as we all know. But this is where our wetland agroecosystems are so important. This area over here corresponding to the schematic on the left, these were really sediment retention basins that grew food. And those were really important to the function of the aquaculture systems, or the lokoi'a, pictured here, a local kuapa, or a walled pond. But the management of the nutrients flowing through the ahupua'a is really essential into productivity in the fish pond. And the fish pond became the nutrient retention basin that grew food. So in systems where erosion and nitrification of waterways is very detrimental, our kupuna in Hawaii figured out how to manage these potentially negative impacts into positives that help to create abundance. And then the water flowing out of these areas was clean for the coral reefs. So again, just going a little bit deeper again, these lo'i, or wetland agroecosystems, functioned as sediment retention basins that grew food, very much like the veins in a leaf. The water was distributed throughout the landscape, and so when there were floods, those flood waters were retained in these sediment retention basins and converted into food. And then the lokoi'a, again, whenever you have intensified agriculture, you can have more mobilized nutrients, but these things became the sediment retention basins that grew food. But the problem is that nowadays we have a broken system, right? So this is a picture from a few years back in Haia where just had a big rain, washed a lot of sediment into the water. So you can see that our indigenous infrastructure is protecting the environment around it, but it is not functioning the way it's supposed to. And because the system is so broken down, we have the fish pond here acting as the sediment retention basin, whereas it's supposed to be acting as the nutrient retention basin. So the work that's happening in Haia is really restoring the 400-acre wetland into a wetland agroecology and managing that sediment so the water flowing into the pond is clean, because you can't grow a lot of fish in muddy water. But talking about the alignment of systems again, these systems are not standalone. So when we talk about Hawaiian aquaculture systems, this is where it starts at Mauka. The kupuna always taught us that the health of the land affects the health of the ocean. And if you want productivity in the ocean, you have to take care of the aina. So it starts up here at Mauka in how you're managing your forest, how you're managing the flow of the water and things like that. And then flowing through our semi-enclosed aquaculture systems that Uncle Glenn was talking about earlier, the 65 in the South Shore of Molokai, the iconic walled ponds, semi-closed aquaculture. But I like to think that there is aquaculture beyond the ponds too. And, you know, we have traditions and stories of feeding fish to make sure that the reefs and the outer reefs had more fish than they would on their own without being fed. So I like to think of this as free range aquaculture. But as Natalie shared earlier, if we can restore these systems, we can feed Hawaii. And if we can, you know, in some of our other collaborations, we're talking about catalyzing circular economies so that we can also create robust economies at the same time. And anyway, restoration of these systems gives us a lot of hope for the future. And so I'm super honored to have been able to share a bit with you folks today. Mahalo.
That we are doing today. Thank you, Kawika, for sharing the mana'o. It's always wonderful.